Babe, I am so looking forward to the company party tonight. We finally get to show up together in public. For once, I won't have to dream up some cockamamie excuse to leave Jade at home. Jade Adams came across those words on her husband's cell phone, and in a heartbeat, her whole world fell apart. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of believing that Clay kept her away from those stuffy company parties out of love and concern. 8 years of trying to be the perfect wife, smart and dedicated, giving up a promising career to prop up his dreams. But right then, as she stared at the message he dashed off to Isla, his bimbo of a secretary, barely out of her teens, a single stark truth burned its way into Jade's brain. She wasn't the protected wife. She was the hidden wife. Clay wasn't embarrassed to take her to parties. He was embarrassed of her. From the window of their London penthouse, watching life go on as usual down below, Jade made a decision that would change everything. If Clay wanted to keep her hidden, she'd make herself impossible to ignore. If he thought he could just waltz in and replace her with some naive young thing, he was about to find out he had completely, utterly underestimated the woman he married. Revenge, after all, is a dish best served ice cold. And Jade had all the time in the world to cook up the perfect meal. At the next company party, the one where Clay would finally trot out Isla as his new arm candy, he would get the surprise of his life. Because Jade Adams, the simple woman he was so ashamed of, was about to morph into the biggest pain in the butt he had ever faced. The game was on. And this time, Jade was calling the shots. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more juicy stories like this one. The discovery. The London sun was beating down on the windows of their fancy-schmancy penthouse apartment in Shoreditch, but Jade hardly noticed the heat. Her dark eyes, usually so bright and full of life, were glued to the screen of the cell phone, shaking in her hands. The messages she had just found on Clay's phone felt like a knife twisting in her heart. Babe, I can't wait for the company party tonight. We finally get to show up together in public. Isla, her husband's secretary, had texted. Me too, my love. This time I don't have to invent an excuse to leave Jade at home, Clay had replied. The man she had spent the last 8 years of her life with. Jade closed her eyes, feeling like the rug had been yanked out from under her. How many times had Clay told her that those company parties were just business? That she'd be bored stiff? That he wanted to protect her from the cutthroat corporate world? And how many times had she bought it, even feeling a little smug about having such a thoughtful husband? Now it all clicked into place. The constant work trips, the hushed phone calls, the unfamiliar perfume clinging to his clothes, the nights he came home so late it defied any business meeting. Clay wasn't shielding her. He was hiding her. The 29-year-old woman slowly got up from the Italian leather sofa they had picked out together on their honeymoon in Milan. Her bare feet touched the cold marble floor as she walked over to the balcony, taking in the panoramic view of the city. Life went on as usual down below. Cars honked, people rushed by, street vendors hawked their wares. As if her world hadn't just turned upside down, Jade was everything a man could want. A law graduate from the London School of Economics, with a fancy specialization in corporate law from the University of Barcelona. She had walked away from a promising career to back Clay's ambitions when he decided to expand his import business. Her beauty was natural and captivating. Dark hair cascaded down her shoulders in soft waves. Her fair skin was a striking contrast to her almond-shaped eyes and a smile that could light up a room. But even more than her looks, it was her brains that always grabbed people's attention. Jade had the kind of analytical and strategic mind that had helped Clay build his business empire, even if he never gave her any public credit. She went over contracts with a fine-tooth comb, found legal loopholes, suggested ways to expand into new markets, all behind the scenes. Always behind the scenes. Now, staring out at the London skyline, Jade felt something shifting inside her. The gut-wrenching pain of betrayal was turning into something different, something stronger. It wasn't just anger. It was resolve, a burning need for justice that made her blood run hot and her mind race. She went back into the apartment and took in every little detail. The Frida Kahlo painting she had chosen, the furniture she had painstakingly selected, the books in her personal library, all perfectly arranged. This was her home, her life, and Clay had stomped all over it. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her best friend, Carmen. "Jade, honey, I saw a pic on Insta from Clay's company party. You didn't go? He was with some chick." Jade didn't need to see the picture to know who the chick was. Isla, the 24-year-old blonde Clay had hired as his executive assistant 6 months ago. The same one who always smiled a little too much when Jade stopped by the office, who made sure to act like she was in the loop on Clay's personal life. But this time, things were going to be different. Jade was done playing the clueless wife who stayed home while her husband carried on with his mistress. She had stumbled upon something they never thought she'd find out. The annual British Importers Association party was happening next week at the Savoy Hotel, the most important event on Clay's business calendar, where he was hoping to seal multi-million-pound deals with international investors. A slow, calculating smile crept across Jade's face. She knew every detail of Clay's business, every client, every supplier, every financial maneuver. Who did they think had organized all the documents, prepared the presentations, and double-checked the contracts? She was the real brains behind Clay Imports. That night, while Clay was working late, code for being with Isla, Jade locked herself in her personal office. The walls were covered with her diplomas and certifications, achievements she had put on the back burner to support her husband. Now they were going to be her weapons. She fired up her laptop and got down to business. First, she needed to figure out exactly what Clay's strategy was for the party. She sneakily accessed his corporate email, a password she had known for years, and started mapping out every meeting, every presentation, every big shot who would be there. Then, she launched her own investigation. She called up old college buddies, former colleagues from her law firm internships, suppliers she had gotten to know in the early years of her marriage. Jade was building her own network, laying the groundwork for what was to come. The hours flew by as she worked. When Clay finally stumbled in at 3 in the morning, he found his wife sleeping soundly in bed. He had no clue she had spent the whole night plotting his downfall. In the days that followed, Jade kept up her usual routine. She made Clay breakfast, asked about his day, and pretended to be interested in his stories about important meetings. But inside, she was strategizing like a chess grandmaster, thinking several moves ahead. She knew that revenge was a dish best served ice cold, and she had all the patience in the world. Clay and Isla had seriously underestimated the wrong woman. They were about to find out that Jade was more than just a trophy wife. She was a force to be reckoned with. When the night of the party rolled around, Clay's world would come crashing down around him, and Jade would be there to watch every single humiliating second. The first move of the game had been made, and she already had a serious advantage. What would you do if you found out about a betrayal like this? Would you confront him right away? Or would you plot your revenge? Tell us what you think in the comments below. The plan. A week had gone by since the devastating discovery, and Jade had gone through a complete transformation. On the surface, she kept up her regular routine. She got up early, made coffee, and sent Clay off with a peck on the cheek. But inside, she was a war machine operating at full throttle. That Tuesday morning, while Clay was belting out a tune in the shower, probably daydreaming about Isla, Jade was in her private office, putting the finishing touches on her plan. She had spent entire nights studying her husband's every move, his every habit, every weakness she could exploit. Her first move had been brilliant in its simplicity. Jade had sought out Helen Vasquez, London's most sought-after corporate event planner. Helen was known for her A-list connections and her ironclad discretion, exactly what Jade needed. "Mrs. Adams," Helen had said during their meeting at a discreet cafe in Notting Hill, "I understand your situation perfectly. So many women go through what you're going through. And yes, I can definitely help you." The plan was elegant. Helen would get Jade a VIP invitation to the British Importers Association party, not as Clay's wife, but as a representative of a made-up group of European investors interested in the Latin American market. The fake identity would be backed up with flawless paperwork, something Helen had done before for other clients in similar situations. But Jade wasn't stopping there. She had stumbled upon something that made everything even more delicious. Ricardo Mendoza, Clay's biggest competitor in the import business, would be at the party. Ricardo was a sophisticated 50-something man, elegant and wildly successful, who had always shown a subtle interest in Jade at the few social gatherings they had both attended in the past. Over the past few days, Jade had accidentally bumped into Ricardo at a few carefully chosen spots around the city. First, at Starbucks, where she forgot her wallet, and he gallantly offered to pay for her coffee. Then, at the Tate Modern, where they had a stimulating conversation about the contemporary art exhibit. Ricardo was smart, cultured, and clearly smitten with her. "You have such a unique perspective on art, Jade," he had said as they studied a piece by Gabriella Roscoe. "It's a shame Clay doesn't share your interests." Ricardo's words had planted a seed. He knew Clay well enough to realize that Jade's husband didn't appreciate her intelligence and sophistication. And now, that information was going to be crucial for the next part of her plan. That afternoon, Jade got the call she had been waiting for. It was Carmen, her best friend, who worked as a gossip columnist for one of London's top magazines. "Jade, I got the dirt you asked for," Carmen said in a low voice. "Isla Herrera, 24 years old, business degree from the University of London. She's been working at Clay's company for 6 months. And yeah, she'll be at the party as his official guest." "Official?" Jade repeated, feeling a pang of hurt that quickly turned into fuel for her determination. "Yeah, honey, from what I hear, Clay's registered her as his business partner for the event. Apparently, he's planning to introduce her to all the international investors." Jade's blood ran cold. Clay wasn't just cheating on her. He was publicly replacing her, presenting Isla as if she were an essential part of his business when it was Jade who had really built everything with him. But this information only strengthened her resolve. If Clay wanted to play dirty, she was going to play even dirtier. That night, after Clay left for one of his late meetings, Jade put the second phase of her plan into motion. She called Miguel Santos, one of London's most respected corporate lawyers. Miguel had been her professor in college and had stayed in touch over the years. "Jade, what a nice surprise," Miguel had said, sounding genuinely pleased. "How's everything going? I still think it's a shame you left the legal profession. You were one of the brightest minds in your class." "Miguel, I need your help with something delicate," Jade had replied. "Could you meet me tomorrow? It's about a rather complex business matter." The meeting was scheduled for the next day at Miguel's elegant office in the West End. When Jade walked in, wearing a killer black suit that showed off her figure and gave her an air of authority, Miguel couldn't hide his admiration. "You look fantastic, Jade. What can I do for you?" Jade explained her situation with the cool detachment of an experienced negotiator. She didn't mention the betrayal. That was irrelevant to the legal stuff. Instead, she focused on the facts. She wanted to understand her rights as a wife when it came to the family business, especially given her unacknowledged contributions to the company's success. "Interesting," Miguel murmured, scribbling away in his notepad. "Do you have any documentation of these contributions?" Jade smiled. For 8 years, she had kept careful records of all the contracts she had reviewed, all the market research she had prepared, all the strategies she had come up with. Clay had never suspected a thing. He just figured she was helping out a little and then forgetting about it. "I have everything documented, Miguel. Every email, every file, every little contribution. Clay never realized I was keeping such detailed records." Miguel's eyes lit up with professional excitement. "Jade, this is gold. With this documentation, we can prove you made a substantial intellectual contribution to the business. If something were to happen to your marriage—" "Something may be about to happen," Jade interrupted softly. Meanwhile, across town, Clay was at a cozy restaurant with Isla, making plans for how to show her off at the party next week. They had no idea that their every move was being closely watched and documented by Jade. "Babe, you'll see how amazing it's going to be," Isla cooed, twirling her blonde hair. "We can finally be a real couple in public." "Yeah, baby," Clay replied, squeezing her hand across the table. "After the party, I'm going to talk to Jade about getting a divorce. I just can't live this lie anymore." If they had known that Jade had already figured everything out and was planning their public destruction, they might not have been smiling so confidently. The next morning, Jade woke up with a surge of power she hadn't felt in ages. Today was the day to put the final phase of her plan into action. She slipped on a navy blue dress that made her eyes pop, put on flawless makeup, and pulled her hair back into a sleek bun. When Clay came downstairs for coffee, he found his wife looking more gorgeous than ever. "You look beautiful today, Jade," he said automatically, but there was something distracted in his voice. His mind was clearly somewhere else, or rather with someone else. "Thank you, darling," she replied with a serene smile. "I have a big meeting today." "A meeting?" Clay looked surprised. It had been months since Jade had mentioned anything about work. "Yeah, I'm thinking about going back to work. Maybe it's time for me to dust off my career." Clay almost choked on his coffee. The idea of Jade going back to work clearly didn't sit well with him. An independent wife would throw a wrench in his plans with Isla. "But honey, there's no need. I take care of everything, you know that." "I know, love," Jade replied, kissing him on the forehead. "But a woman needs to feel useful, don't you think?" After Clay left for work, Jade allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. In a few days, at the most important party of her husband's career, she would burst onto the scene like the hurricane he never saw coming. Her revenge was taking shape, and it was going to be sweeter than she could have ever imagined. Do you think Clay and Isla deserve what's coming to them? The gala. Only 3 days until the British Importers Association party, and Jade was putting the final touches on her transformation. She had spent the morning at one of London's swankiest salons, where a team of pros had worked their magic to take her natural beauty to the next level. Her dark hair now cascaded down her back in perfect waves that framed her face in a way that could be in a movie. The makeup applied by an artist who worked with A-listers made her almond-shaped eyes look both elegant and mesmerizing. Her nails, painted in a shade of red that screamed power, completed the makeover. But the real change wasn't just skin deep. It was internal. Jade had rediscovered the confidence she had lost during her marriage. Now, when she looked in the mirror, she saw the sharp and driven woman she had been before she met Clay. Her first stop after the salon was at Paloma Herrera's boutique, one of Mexico's most famous designers. Jade had scheduled a private appointment to pick out the dress she would wear to the party, a dress that needed to convey power, elegance, and a crystal-clear message that she wasn't the doormat wife everyone thought she was. "Mrs. Adams." Paloma greeted her with a genuine smile. "It's so good to see you. I heard you were looking for something." "Special?" "Very special," Jade confirmed. "I need a dress that will make a grand entrance." Paloma, who had dressed first ladies and international celebrities, immediately got the picture. "I think I have just what you need." The dress was a work of art, a one-of-a-kind gown in emerald green Italian silk that was the perfect shade for Jade's skin. The cut was impeccable, elegant enough for a corporate event, but with a touch of sexiness that would guarantee all eyes would be on her. The dress cost the same as what 3 of Clay's employees made in a month, but Jade didn't hesitate. After all, she had been instrumental in building the fortune she was now going to use for her revenge. "It's perfect," she whispered, staring at her reflection in the mirror. "Absolutely perfect." Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Clay was in his office, trying to focus on work, but his mind was completely consumed with thoughts of Isla. He had been texting with her all morning, going over every detail of how they would present themselves at the party. "Babe, I bought a light pink dress for the party," Isla had texted. "Do you think it looks good on me?" "You look beautiful in anything, my love," Clay had replied. "I can't wait to introduce you to everyone as my partner." What Clay didn't know was that Jade had access to all of these conversations. Over the past few days, she had secretly installed monitoring software on his phone, a skill she had picked up during her digital law studies. Every message, every plan, every move they made was known to her before it even happened. That afternoon, Jade had her final meeting with Helen Vasquez to finalize the details of her fake identity for the party. Helen had created a completely believable persona. Jade would be introduced as Jade Montenegro, a rep for a group of European investors interested in expanding business in Latin America. "All the documents are ready," Helen explained, handing her a fancy folder. Your business card, credentials for the made-up company, even a professional website we created. You'll be one of the most important people at the party. And the contacts I mentioned? Jade asked. Oh yes, Ricardo Mendoza has already confirmed he'll be there. And I happened to mention that a very interesting female investor would be attending. He seemed very interested. I also talked to a few financial reporters. They'll be there covering the big deals. But they're always looking for new and beautiful faces. Jade smiled. Everything was falling perfectly into place. That night, at dinner, Jade watched Clay closely. He was visibly on edge, constantly checking his phone and seeming miles away. Clearly, the party and the prospect of finally coming clean about his relationship with Isla were making him nervous. You seem worried, darling, Jade commented casually, delicately cutting the salmon on her plate. Oh, it's just work. You know how these corporate parties are. A lot of stress, a lot of important business. I imagine, Jade said. So, you're going alone? For a split second, Clay hesitated. Jade could see the inner turmoil playing out in his eyes. Part of him wanted to tell her the truth, to get the lie off his chest. But another part of him still didn't have the guts. Yeah, I'm going alone. You know you hate those things. True, Jade agreed, sipping her wine. But sometimes I wonder if I shouldn't try to get more involved in your work life. We're a team after all, aren't we? The sarcasm in her voice was lost on Clay, who was too busy replying to a text from Isla under the table. Later that night, after Clay had drifted off to sleep, Jade locked herself in her office to do a final run-through of her plan. She had created a detailed timeline of everything that would happen at the party. 7:30 p.m. Clay and Isla show up at the event. 7:45 p.m. Jade shows up as Jade Montenegro. 8:15 p.m. First strategic run-in with Ricardo Mendoza. 8:30 p.m. Slowly make her way to the business crowd where Clay is. 9 p.m. The moment of truth. Every minute was planned with military precision. Jade knew exactly where Clay would be at every moment, who he would be talking to, and what deals he would be trying to cut. After all, she had been running his schedule for years. Jade's phone buzzed. It was a text from Carmen. Honey, I got more scoop. Isla's been telling all her friends that she's going to make her debut as Clay's official girlfriend at the party. She even posted a pic on Insta Stories trying on dresses with the caption, "Special night coming." Jade sighed. Isla's naivete was almost endearing. The poor girl actually thought Clay was going to dump Jade for her without any consequences, that she could just waltz in and take over as the wife without any pushback. She was about to learn that she had seriously underestimated the woman she was trying to replace. The next morning, Jade woke up feeling utterly calm. It was like all the anxiety, all the pain, all the uncertainty of the past few days had hardened into a cold, calculated resolve. She made Clay breakfast for the last time as a clueless, duped wife. Starting tomorrow, everything would be different. When he came downstairs, he found her looking more radiant than ever. "Good morning, love," she said, pouring him coffee exactly the way he liked it. "Good morning. You look really beautiful today." "Thank you. Oh, by the way, I'm going out with Carmen tomorrow night. Dinner and a movie. You don't mind, do you?" "Of course not. Have fun." Clay could barely hide his relief. If Jade was out with her friend, he wouldn't have to come up with any more lame excuses for coming home late with Isla after the party. After he left, Jade allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. Tomorrow night, Clay was going to find out that he had completely misjudged the woman he married. And Isla was going to learn that some positions in life can't be won with just youth and innocence. The revenge was in its final 24 hours of prep. And it was going to be devastatingly perfect. Like this video if you're on Jade's side. The showdown. The Grand Ballroom at the Savoy Hotel had never hosted an event as high-profile as the annual British Importers Association party. The space was decked out with exotic flower arrangements, sparkling crystal chandeliers, and a panoramic view of the city that made your jaw drop. The most powerful people in British business mingled with glasses of French champagne and hors d'oeuvres prepared by the hotel's top chef. Right on schedule at 7:30 p.m., Clay arrived at the party with Isla on his arm. She looked stunning in a light pink dress that emphasized her youth. Her blonde hair cascaded in gentle waves over her shoulders. Clay, dressed to kill in his black tuxedo, flashed a smile brimming with the self-assurance of a man finally able to flaunt his conquest. "Nervous, darling?" he breathed into Layla's ear as they handed over their invitations at the reception. "A little," she confessed, squeezing his arm. "But I'm happy. I can finally be at your side, your real woman." Clay smiled, kissing her hand with a flourish. Today marks our official debut as a couple. The first of many moments like this. They were greeted with enthusiasm by the other attendees, all movers and shakers in the business world. Clay introduced Layla as his new business partner and strategic consultant, titles that brought a proud smile to the young woman's face. She remained blissfully unaware of the curious and subtly hostile glances being thrown her way by some of the wives present, seasoned women who immediately pegged the situation for what it was. Meanwhile, just a few yards away, Jade was putting the final touches on her transformation. She stared at herself in the full-length mirror of her walk-in closet, almost failing to recognize the woman staring back. The Paloma Herrera emerald green dress had turned her into a vision of modern goddess, radiating elegance, power, and undeniable beauty. Her hair was swept up into a sophisticated low bun, with a few carefully placed strands framing her face. Her makeup was flawless, her eyes accentuated by perfectly winged eyeliner. Her lips, painted a nude tone, highlighted the natural beauty of her mouth. Her jewelry was understated yet undeniably expensive. Diamond earrings, a gift from Clay on their third wedding anniversary, and a pearl necklace that had once belonged to her grandmother. "Perfect," she murmured to herself, giving the dress one last adjustment. "It's time to show them who I really am." At 7:45 p.m. Jade settled into the back of the Mercedes-Benz that Helen had arranged for the occasion. The driver, discreetly instructed on the importance of being on time, navigated the London streets with the precision of a seasoned professional. During the ride, Jade mentally ran through every aspect of her plan. She knew exactly where Clay would be at 8:15 p.m. At the main bar, deep in conversation with representatives from the Japanese company, Tanaka Industries, trying to finalize a deal he had been chasing for months. She also knew that Isla would likely be glued to his side, smiling and nodding blankly, clearly lost in the technical jargon about international logistics and customs regulations. At 8:10 p.m., the Mercedes glided to a stop in front of the Savoy. Jade took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and stepped out of the car with the grace of a queen. The doorman, clearly taken aback by her elegance, practically tripped over himself as he opened the door for her. "Good evening, madam," he stammered. "Welcome to the Savoy." "Thank you," Jade replied, offering a smile that was both gentle and commanding. She swept into the hotel and made her way to the elevator that would whisk her up to the party hall. In the elevator mirror, she touched up her lipstick one last time and allowed herself a small, anticipatory smile. In just a few minutes, the most important performance of her life would begin. The elevator doors opened onto the party floor, and Jade made her grand entrance. The effect was immediate. Conversations died mid-sentence, heads swiveled, and whispers rippled through the crowd as people tried to figure out who this stunning woman was. Helen, strategically positioned near the entrance, made a beeline for her. "Jade Montenegro," she announced, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "What a pleasure to see you. How was your flight from Barcelona?" "Excellent, thank you," Jade replied in flawless English, with a hint of an accent that Helen had suggested to add authenticity. "I'm very excited to finally meet the British business community. I've heard wonderful things about the local market." Meanwhile, across the room, Clay was exactly where Jade had predicted, deep in animated conversation with the Tanaka Industries executives. Isla was, as expected, by his side, smiling vacantly and nodding along, clearly out of her depth in the technical discussion about international logistics and customs regulations. Mr. Martin, Hiroshi Tanaka, the regional director, was saying, "We are impressed with your proposal, but we need assurances regarding your company's ability to handle larger volumes." "Absolutely, Mr. Tanaka," Clay replied confidently. Our infrastructure has recently undergone a significant expansion, and we have formed strategic partnerships that allow us to. He trailed off mid-sentence, his attention snagged by movement on the other side of the room. A woman in a green dress was captivating everyone. There was something familiar about her, a quality that caused his heart to beat faster in a way he couldn't quite explain. "Excuse me for a moment," he murmured, handing his card to Tanaka. "Lila, keep the conversation flowing. I'll be right back." Isla, confused but obedient, tried to maintain a smile as Clay turned and walked away, clearly captivated by something or someone. Across the room, Jade had been introduced to Ricardo Mendoza, exactly as planned. The businessman, impeccably dressed in his tuxedo, couldn't conceal his admiration for the mysterious European investor. "Miss Montenegro," Ricardo said, kissing her hand with a flourish. "It's a distinct pleasure to meet you. Helen tells me you represent a consortium interested in expanding into Latin America?" "That's correct, Mr. Mendoza. We're always on the lookout for partnerships with visionary entrepreneurs," Jade replied, her eyes sparkling with an intelligence that captivated Ricardo. "I've heard fantastic things about your company. Perhaps we could explore potential collaboration opportunities?" "That would be an honor. Allow me to introduce you to some of my colleagues in the sector." As Ricardo guided her through the hall, Jade kept Clay in her peripheral vision. She saw him slowly approaching, clearly intrigued by her presence. The plan was unfolding perfectly. "Ricardo," she said softly. "Isn't that Clay Martin from Clay Imports over there? I've heard a lot about his company." "Ah yes, Clay is something of a competitor," Ricardo replied with a slightly ironic smile. "A competent businessman, I must concede, though his methods are, at times, questionable." "How so?" "Well, we recently uncovered that he has been using privileged information obtained through, shall we say, unconventional sources. Nothing strictly illegal, mind you, but certainly ethically dubious." Jade feigned surprise. Although she knew exactly what Ricardo was alluding to, it was one of the strategies she herself had developed for Clay years ago, using personal contacts to get inside information on bids before they were made public. It would now become another weapon in her arsenal. At that moment, Clay finally got close enough to see the mysterious woman's face clearly. When his eyes met hers, his world seemed to stop spinning. It was Jade, his wife. But it wasn't the Jade he knew. This woman radiated power, confidence, a sophisticated sensuality he had never witnessed in her before. For a moment, he stood paralyzed, unable to reconcile the submissive and home-loving woman he thought he knew with this goddess, who now held the attention of the entire room. "Jade," he whispered in disbelief, taking a step forward. "Excuse me," she replied, faking confusion with an award-worthy performance. "I think you must have me confused with someone else. I'm Jade Montenegro, a representative of the Barcelona Investment Consortium." Ricardo watched the interaction with growing interest. "You know each other?" "Aye," Clay stammered, completely dumbfounded. "Sorry, she bears a striking resemblance to someone I know." Jade smiled with calculated coolness. "Oh, how interesting. You must be Clay Martin from Clay Imports. I've heard a great deal about your company. Ricardo here was just telling me about the innovative methods you employ." The word innovative was laced with a tone that sent a shiver down Clay's spine. There was something in those eyes, his wife's eyes, that warned him something was terribly wrong. "Jade, what are you doing here?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry, Mr. Martin, but you seem determined to confuse me with someone else. Perhaps we should focus on business. I understand you've been trying to close a deal with Tanaka Industries?" Clay's blood ran cold. How could she know about the deal with the Japanese? It was confidential information he had only shared with one person. His eyes darted back to Isla, who was still across the room, struggling to keep the conversation going with the Japanese executives. Suddenly, everything began to fall into place. Jade knew. Somehow, his wife had discovered everything. "Ricardo," Jade continued, her voice as soft as silk, yet as sharp as a blade. "You mentioned something about questionable methods. Would you care to elaborate? As an investor, I need to fully understand the ethical standards of the companies we're considering partnering with. Ricardo, delighted to have the opportunity to undermine his competitor in front of a potential investor, grinned. Well, there are rumors circulating that Clay Imports obtains information about bids through intimate relationships with employees of public companies. Jade feigned shock. Intimate relationships? What kind of relationships? The kind that can compromise the impartiality of certain business decisions? Ricardo replied, looking directly at Clay. Clay was turning pale. He had no idea where Ricardo had gotten that information, but it was dangerously close to the truth. And, even worse, he was being exposed in front of his own wife, who, for some unfathomable reason, was pretending to be a foreign investor. At that moment, Layla approached, clearly puzzled by Clay's extended absence. Babe, the Japanese are asking where you went. They want to finalize the contract details. The silence that followed was deafening. Isla had just called Clay babe in front of Ricardo Mendoza and the mysterious investor. Worse, she hadn't realized that the investor was, in fact, her lover's wife. Ricardo raised an eyebrow, clearly putting two and two together. Jade maintained an expression of mild confusion, as if she didn't fully understand the personal dynamics she was witnessing. Your secretary? Jade asked Clay innocently. Aye. Clay was completely lost. How could he possibly explain Isla without exposing the affair? How could he maintain the professional facade when his personal life was imploding in public? Actually, Isla said, with a naive confidence that filled Jade with a mix of pity and irritation, I'm Clay's business partner, and also, well, we're a couple. The words echoed through the group like a bombshell. Ricardo couldn't suppress a satisfied smile. He finally had concrete evidence that Clay was using personal relationships to advance his business. And Jade smiled. It wasn't a gentle or understanding smile. It was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. How interesting, she said, her voice maintaining its soft tone, but carrying a coldness that made Clay shiver. And his wife? Does she know about this partnership? Comment your thoughts on the final outcome, the final triumph. The 5 seconds of silence that followed Jade's question felt like an eternity. Clay was frozen, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to grasp the magnitude of what was unfolding. Isla, still oblivious to the investor's true identity, smiled with the naivete of someone who believed she had finally secured her place in the sun. Asterisk his wife asterisk? Isla laughed, a crystalline sound that cut through the air like a funeral bell. Oh, Miss Montenegro, that's a complicated story. Clay is in the process of separating from his wife. She's a very simple woman. She doesn't understand anything about business, you know. She stays home, has no ambitions. She's not like us, modern and independent women. Every word Isla uttered was like a stab to Clay's heart, who watched in horror as his mistress obliterated any hope of salvaging the situation with even a shred of dignity. Ricardo watched everything with the detached interest of someone witnessing the downfall of their biggest competitor. And Jade maintained her icy smile, preparing for the final blow. What an interesting perspective, Jade said softly. And tell me, miss? I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Layla Herrera, the young woman replied proudly. I graduated in business from the University of London and have been working as a strategic consultant for Clay Imports for a few months. Asterisk strategic consultant asterisk, Jade repeated, savoring each word. What impressive responsibilities for someone so young. Tell me, what kind of strategies have you developed for the company? Isla blushed, clearly unsure how to answer. Her actual role in the company was primarily decorative. She managed Clay's schedule, answered phone calls, and occasionally typed up reports that other people had prepared. Well, I help with the general organization of operations. General organization, Jade murmured, pretending to take mental notes. And what about the market analyses, the feasibility studies, the international contract negotiations? Layla's silence spoke volumes. Ricardo began to chuckle discreetly, finally understanding that he was witnessing a slow-motion massacre. "You know," Jade continued, her voice taking on a dangerous edge, "it's interesting how family businesses operate. Often, the true strategist behind the success is someone who works tirelessly behind the scenes, without ever receiving public recognition." Clay closed his eyes, bracing himself for what was to come. "For example," Jade continued, discreetly retrieving some documents from her handbag, "I was reviewing some materials on clay imports prior to our possible partnership and discovered something fascinating. Most of the company's expansion strategies, the most innovative market analyses, and even the most lucrative contracts, all appear to have been developed by someone with advanced legal training, someone with a specialization in international business law." Ricardo leaned forward, intrigued. Clay tried to interrupt, but Jade pressed on relentlessly. "But here's the really interesting part. Officially, Clay Imports has never employed a full-time corporate lawyer. So, who did develop these brilliant strategies?" She paused dramatically, letting the question hang in the air. "Unless," she continued, a devilish smile playing on her lips, "the true strategist was someone very close to Mr. Martin, someone with intimate access to all the company's information, someone who worked tirelessly behind the scenes without ever receiving public credit." By now, several people nearby were openly eavesdropping on the conversation. Jade's voice, though soft, carried a natural authority that drew people in. "Are you referring to someone specific?" Ricardo asked, clearly captivated. "I am referring," Jade said, her voice now laced with a chill that made Clay shiver, "to Clay Martin's wife, Jade Adams, a woman with a law degree from the London School of Economics and a specialization in corporate law from the University of Barcelona. A woman who abandoned a promising career to support her husband's dreams. A woman who spent the past 8 years developing every strategy, reviewing every contract, and analyzing every market opportunity that transformed Clay Imports from a small family business into an import empire." The silence surrounding them was absolute. People had edged closer, drawn in by the palpable tension in the air. Clay was ashen-faced, finally grasping the full scope of what his wife had discovered and meticulously planned. "But you know what's most interesting?" Jade continued, now addressing Isla directly, who was beginning to look deeply uncomfortable. "It's that this simple woman who doesn't understand business is, in fact, the real architect of the success you're now claiming as your own." Isla glanced nervously at Clay, seeking reassurance, but he remained petrified. Finally, the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to slot into place in the young woman's mind. "Miss Montenegro," Clay finally managed to croak out, "can we speak in private?" "I'm sorry, Mr. Martin, but I don't believe we have anything to discuss in private. As a potential investor, all my questions must be asked transparently." At that moment, Helen approached the group, followed by 2 well-dressed men Jade recognized from her preparations. They were journalists from The Economist, London's most prominent business publication. "Jade," Helen said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Thomas Restrepo and Mr. Carlos Vega from The Economist. They're working on a special report on international investors in the UK." The journalists greeted Jade respectfully, clearly impressed by her demeanor and articulation. "Miss Montenegro, it's a pleasure to meet you. Would you be willing to answer a few questions regarding your investment plans in the country?" "Of course," Jade replied gracefully, "though I was just discussing some ethical concerns regarding certain local companies with Mr. Mendoza." "Ethical concerns, asterisk?" Thomas Restrepo asked, instantly intrigued. As an investigative journalist, he had a keen sense for scandals. Ricardo, seizing the opportunity to further expose his competitor, wasted no time. "We were discussing questionable practices of certain companies in the sector, the use of privileged information, inappropriate personal relationships to gain competitive advantages," and Jade added, her voice cutting through the air like a sharpened blade, "and the misappropriation of intellectual property." The words fell like a cluster bomb. Clay finally understood that there was no way out. His wife hadn't simply discovered the affair. She had orchestrated his complete and public downfall. Intellectual property? Carlos Vega asked, his journalistic instincts fully engaged. Yes, Jade replied, retrieving more documents from her bag. I have evidence here that certain companies have systematically misappropriated the intellectual work of unacknowledged collaborators, specifically, spouses, who contributed significantly to the development of business strategies without receiving proper credit or compensation. She handed the documents to the journalists. These are contracts, market analyses, and expansion strategies, all developed by an uncredited source, but which were publicly presented as original work by the company's management. Clay tried to intervene. Those documents are private. You can't actually. Jade interrupted him, her Jade Montenegro mask finally slipping. I can, because all of those documents were developed by me, Jade Adams, your wife. The woman you just allowed your mistress to describe as simple and unambitious. The impact of the revelation was seismic. Isla turned deathly pale, finally understanding that she had just spent the past few minutes denigrating the wife of the man she loved. A wife who was now revealing herself to be far more formidable than she had ever imagined. The journalists began snapping photos and scribbling notes furiously. Ricardo laughed openly, thoroughly enjoying the spectacle. And Clay sank into a nearby chair, finally comprehending that he had lost everything. Gentlemen of the press, Jade continued, now speaking with the authority of an experienced executive. I have a proposal for you. How about an exclusive interview about female intellectual property in the business world? I have a fascinating story to tell about how talented women are systematically erased from the successes they help build. That would be fantastic, Thomas Restrepo responded immediately. Could we schedule it for tomorrow? Perfect. And I assume you'd also be interested in investigating the ethical practices of clay imports? I have extensive documentation on questionable methods of obtaining contracts. While the journalists made arrangements and Ricardo offered additional information about his competitors' dubious practices, Isla finally mustered the courage to speak. You're really his wife? Jade turned to her with a look that blended pity and contempt. I am, or rather I was, because after tonight, I believe our marriage has definitively reached its end. I didn't know you were smart, capable, powerful. No, darling. You only believed the version of me that Clay presented, the simple wife who stays home doing nothing. Did you ever stop to wonder how a mediocre man like Clay managed to build a business empire all by himself? Isla was speechless. Tears began to stream down her face as the full extent of her naivete became crushingly apparent. Jade turned to Clay, who remained silent and defeated. As for you, my dear ex-husband, I hope you enjoyed your last party as the owner of Clay Imports, because starting tomorrow, when my lawyers file for divorce, you will discover exactly what percentage of the company legally belongs to me. She paused, letting the words sink in. You see, for 8 years, I meticulously documented every contribution I made to the company, every strategy, every analysis, every contract. And, according to the law, spouses are entitled to compensation for intellectual contributions to family businesses. Clay's face drained of all remaining color. Oh, and by the way, Jade continued with a smile that dripped with venom, Ricardo, I believe we discussed a possible partnership between your company and my future independent venture? That would be an honor, Jade, Ricardo replied, kissing her hand with genuine admiration. A woman with your intelligence and experience would be an invaluable partner. Jade turned one last time to Clay and Isla. Revenge, she said softly, is truly a dish best served cold, and you two have just been served. With that, she took Ricardo's arm and walked away, leaving behind the wreckage of the life she had built with Clay and Layla's shattered dreams. Behind her, she could hear the flurry of camera flashes as the journalists captured the image of the destroyed couple, and the sound of their increasingly aggressive questions. Jade Adams had died that night. In her place, a stronger, smarter, and far more dangerous woman had been born, and her empire was just beginning. The party continued around them, but for Clay and Isla, the music had stopped forever. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed into the executive office on the top floor of the Shard, one of London's most prestigious buildings. Jade Montenegro, the professional name Jade had adopted after the divorce, carefully adjusted her porcelain cup as she reviewed the financial reports of her new company, Montenegro Strategic Consulting. 6 months. Just 6 months had passed since that transformative night at the Savoy, and Jade had built an empire that rivaled anything Clay had ever dreamed of achieving. The secretary's phone rang in the adjacent office. "Miss Montenegro, Mr. Ricardo Mendoza is here for the 10 o'clock meeting," announced Sophia, her executive assistant, an experienced and efficient woman in her 40s, a far cry from the decorative secretaries preferred by other executives. "You can send him in, Sophia. And please have her cancel my schedule after lunch. Ricardo has an interview for CNN International at 2 o'clock this afternoon." Jade smiled as she reflected on her journey. The public humiliation of Clay that night had been merely the opening gambit in a far more complex and deeply satisfying game of chess. Ricardo entered the office, as impeccably dressed as ever. But now, there was a new glint in his eyes, a mixture of genuine admiration and a hint of reverence, something Jade recognized immediately. He was no longer the powerful businessman courting a potential investor. He was a partner, recognizing an equal. "Good morning, Jade," he said, delicately kissing her hand. "The third quarter numbers are truly impressive. Our joint venture has surpassed all projections." "Good morning, Ricardo. Please have a seat. We have much to discuss regarding the expansion into Colombia." As he settled into the Italian leather armchair, a piece she had personally selected to complement the minimalist and powerful decor of her office, Jade allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The joint venture between Montenegro Strategic and Ricardo's companies had become one of the most profitable partnerships in the British international trade sector. But the true pleasure wasn't solely derived from the financial success. It stemmed from the poetic justice of her rise, built upon the rubble of Clay's arrogance. "Before we begin," Ricardo said, retrieving a magazine from his briefcase, "did you happen to see the cover of The Economist this week?" Jade smiled. "How could I not see it?" Her photograph dominated the cover of London's leading business magazine, accompanied by the headline, "Jade Montenegro, the strategic mind that revolutionized UK international trade." The 8-page article told the sanitized version of her story. A brilliant lawyer specializing in international business law who had chosen to launch her own company after years of working discreetly as a consultant. The piece highlighted her impressive academic background, her innovative strategic vision, and her almost uncanny ability to identify market opportunities before her competitors. Of course, the article made no direct mention of Clay. It didn't need to. Anyone in the British business. Those in the industry were well aware of the origins of the experience and knowledge that had propelled Jade Montenegro to become one of the most sought-after consultants in the country. "It's a flattering article," Jade commented with a touch of modesty, "although I do think they exaggerated a few things." "Exaggerated?" Ricardo chuckled. "Jade, in just 6 months, you've built a company that already pulls in more revenue per quarter than some established companies do in a whole year. You've transformed 3 family businesses into market leaders and developed international expansion strategies that are being studied at universities. If there's any exaggeration, it's in your modesty." It was the truth. After that pivotal night, Jade had channeled all of her pent-up energy and intellect into building something that was truly her own. Every new client she landed, every successful strategy she put in place, and every multi-million-dollar contract she closed was a silent testament to her real value. And clients were coming to her in droves. Businesspeople who had known her work from behind the scenes at Clay Imports were finally able to directly hire the brilliant mind behind the strategies they had so admired. International executives who had been impressed by market analyses developed by Clay's team realized they could now work directly with the actual author. Jade's phone vibrated quietly. It was a message from Carmen, her best friend and now the director of communications for her company. "Honey, you have got to see this. I just got a call from Forbes UK. They want to include you on their list of the 30 most influential businesswomen in the country. And that's not all. CNN UK wants to do a documentary about women who have turned personal failures into amazing business success stories." Jade quickly typed a reply. "Schedule the interviews. And Carmen, thank you for always being there for me. Is it good news? Ricardo asked, noticing the smile on her face. There's always good news when you control your own narrative, Jade replied philosophically. But let's get back to business. How are the negotiations going with the Colombian group? They spent the next while discussing expansion details and market strategies. Jade couldn't help but flash back to those dark days 6 months prior, when she had discovered the betrayal and felt as if her entire world had come crashing down. What a naive woman she had been, thinking that her life depended on Clay. What a terrible mistake she had made by diminishing her own dreams to support his. What precious time she had wasted being the perfect wife for a man who didn't even value her enough to acknowledge her publicly. But maybe all of that had been necessary. Maybe she needed to experience that humiliation to rediscover her own strength. Maybe she needed to be underestimated to learn to never underestimate herself again. The intercom broke into her thoughts. Ms. Montenegro, Ms. Helen Vasquez is on the line. She says it's about the launch event for your foundation. Thanks, Sophia. Tell her I'll call her back in an hour. The foundation. That had been another project that was born from that traumatic night. The Jade Montenegro Foundation for Female Entrepreneurship had already helped more than 200 women launch their own businesses. The focus was very specific. Women who had sacrificed their careers for marriages or relationships and now wanted to rebuild their professional lives. Every story that reached the foundation echoed her own experience: lawyers who became housewives, engineers who abandoned their projects to support their husbands, and doctors who put their specialties on hold to raise children, only to discover that their husbands had moved on to younger women. Jade had turned her pain into purpose, her humiliation into strength for other women, and nothing gave her more satisfaction than receiving calls from businesswomen who had rebuilt their lives with the help of the foundation. Jade, Ricardo said, interrupting her thoughts. Can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Have you heard anything about him? Your ex-husband? Jade paused, considering the question. Yes, she had heard news. How could she not? In the business circles of London, the community was small, and gossip spread quickly. Clay had tried to salvage his company after the scandal, but the combination of media exposure, the loss of important contracts, and the divorce lawsuit, where Jade had legally proven her intellectual contribution to the business, had been devastating. Clay Imports was forced to declare bankruptcy just 3 months after that fateful night. He was now working as a sales manager at a mid-sized company, a position that represented a significant fall from his former status as a successful businessman. People in the industry knew his story. They knew that the empire he had built had actually been built by his ex-wife. They knew he had traded a brilliant partner for a youthful fling. And Isla, poor Isla, had learned in the cruelest way possible that being the other woman rarely ends well. Clay, desperate and humiliated, had taken out his frustrations on the young woman he considered responsible for his downfall. The relationship had ended in just 6 weeks, leaving Isla unemployed, disgraced, and with a ruined professional reputation. She was currently working at a small accounting firm in the city's suburbs, far from the glamorous world she thought she had conquered. I have heard some things, Jade replied carefully, but I prefer to focus on the present and the future. The past has already served its purpose. Ricardo nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in her words. You are an extraordinary woman, Jade. Turning betrayal into triumph and humiliation into an empire is not something everyone can do. Any woman has that strength within her, Ricardo. Sometimes we just need an extreme situation to discover it. The phone rang again. It was Sophia, informing her that the executives from the German company Hoffman Industries had arrived for their meeting about European expansion. Jade stood up, adjusting the blazer of her tailored suit, which cost more than Clay's current monthly salary. The click of her Louboutin heels echoed on the marble floor as she headed toward the door. Ricardo, let's go welcome our German guests. I have a proposal that will revolutionize our presence in the European market. As they walked down the corridor toward the main meeting room, Jade passed in front of the full-length mirror that decorated the wall. The woman who stared back at her was unrecognizable from the submissive and naive wife of 6 months ago. This Jade radiated confidence, power, and success. Her eyes shone with the keen intelligence of someone who had learned to never underestimate her own worth again. Her smile carried the serenity of someone who had turned her greatest defeat into her greatest victory. She was no longer the wife Clay was ashamed to introduce. She was the woman he could never win back. And contrary to what many people expected, Jade felt no bitterness or desire for further revenge. That night at the Savoy had been enough. Clay and Isla had received exactly the consequences that their choices deserved. Now, Jade was too busy building her own legacy to waste time looking back. As she entered the meeting room, where the German business executives rose respectfully to greet her, Jade Montenegro smiled, not a smile of revenge or superiority, but a smile of genuine satisfaction. She had proved something much more important than her ability to exact revenge. She had proved her capacity for rebirth, and that, after all, was the sweetest triumph of all. The meeting began, and Jade Montenegro, formerly Jade Adams, the hidden ex-wife, took her place at the head of the table as the CEO of one of the most respected consulting firms in London. The future had never looked so bright.